Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the chosen host of the Venom symbiote. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world had gone gray, not in the literal sense. The sun still bled orange and pink across the beautiful skyline, casting long, mournful shadows that stretched like grasping fingers. The neon signs of the city were beginning to flicker to life, promising an evening of energy and excitement. But for Izuku Midoriya, all color had been leached from existence. His world was a grayscale photograph, faded and torn at the edges. His bright red sneakers, usually a source of small, defiant pride, were just dull shapes scuffing against the pavement. His yellow backpack felt like it was filled with lead, each strap a crushing weight on his slumped shoulders. The familiar, vibrant green of his own hair, reflected in a shop window, seemed muted, as if even it had given up hope. The day had started with a sliver of that very hope, a dangerous, foolish thing he should have known better than to nurture. He'd seen All Might, his idol, his god, in the flesh, and then, he had committed the ultimate sin. He had asked the question. He had clung to the hero's leg, soared through the air in a terrifying blur, and landed on a rooftop where dreams went to die. It's not bad to dream, young man. But you need to be realistic. The words weren't cruel. That was the worst part. They were gentle, paternal, and utterly final. All Might, the symbol of peace, had looked at him, quirkless, useless Deku, and passed judgment. He had opened Izuku's chest, carefully plucked out the flickering candle flame of his ambition, and snuffed it out between his thumb and forefinger. Then came the sludge villain. Again. And this time, it had Kaken. Izuku's feet had moved before his brain could protest. He had run in, a pathetic act of suicidal idiocy, armed with nothing but a backpack and a lifetime of frantic, useless notes. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just gotten in the way. It was All Might who saved the day, All Might who fixed the mess. All Might who stood tall while the other pro-heroes praised Kaken's tenacity and admonished Izuku's recklessness. Even Kaken's words, usually sharp enough to draw blood, felt different this time. Earlier, before it all, they had been a casual, brutal cruelty. If you want to be a hero so bad, there's a quick way to do it. Believe that you'll have a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof. At the time, he'd been shaken, but it was just Kaken being Kaken. Now, the words echoed in the hollow space where his dream used to be. They weren't a taunt anymore. They sounded like a suggestion. A path. Izuku's feet, moving without conscious thought, had carried him away from the bustling main streets. He couldn't go home. He couldn't face his mom's worried expression, her gentle questions that would make him shatter into a million pieces. He couldn't bear her telling him she was proud of him for trying, not when the world had just told him that his trying was worthless. He found himself on a path leading towards the Goba Municipal Beach Park. It was a cruel joke of a name. There was no park, no beach. It was a city-sized landfill, a forgotten monument to illegal dumping where mountains of trash, rusting cars, broken appliances, mountains of plastic bags, met the sea. The air was thick with the stench of salt and decay. It was a place where things went to be forgotten. It felt appropriate. He wasn't going to the roof. He wasn't that far gone. Not yet. But he wanted to be alone. He wanted to be in a place that looked exactly how he felt inside. Broken, discarded, and drowning in filth. He navigated the treacherous landscape of junk, his feet sinking into the sand with every step. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the beach was cast into a deep, oppressive twilight. The only light came from the distant city glow and a cold, indifferent moon. He sat on a discarded, disemboweled washing machine, its metal cold against his legs, and finally let the tears come. They weren't loud, hiccuping sobs. They were silent, hot tears that tracked clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. They were tears for a 10-year-old dream, for every notebook he'd ever filled, for every All Might figurine he'd ever cherished. He was mourning a death, the death of the person he had spent his entire life trying to become. A prayer, desperate and formless, bubbled up in his chest. It wasn't to any god. It was just a raw scream of need sent out into the uncaring cosmos. Please. Anything. Anyone. I just want to be strong. I just want to help people. Why wasn't I good enough? As if in answer, the cosmos screamed back. A thin, high-pitched whistle cut through the mournful sound of the waves. Izuku's head snapped up, his tear-filled eyes scanning the sky. A tiny star was growing bigger, brighter, falling at an impossible speed. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a firework. It was a streak of incandescent white fire, arcing directly towards his section of the beach. He scrambled backward, falling off the washing machine with a yelp. There was a final, deafening shriek of superheated air, and then a concussive thump that shook the very ground he was on. It wasn't an explosion, not a loud one. It was a deep, resonant impact, like a giant slamming his fist into the earth. It landed less than 50 meters away, sending a shower of sand and debris into the air. Silence returned, thick and heavy. A plume of steam hissed from the point of impact. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden quiet. His analytical mind, the only part of him that hadn't completely shut down, was already racing. Too small for a commercial satellite. Too fast for falling debris. A meteorite? It should have made a bigger crater. And it glowed blue just before impact. Morbid curiosity warred with a primal instinct for self-preservation. But then, a thought, bleak and humorless, surfaced. What's the worst that could happen? The universe had already given him its answer for the day. Maybe it had one more piece of cosmic punctuation to add. He picked himself up, his legs trembling, and began to walk towards the impact site. The air grew warmer, thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something organic and alien, like burnt sugar and scorched metal. He crested a small dune of garbage and looked down into the crater. It was small, no more than 2 meters across. In the center of the glassy, fused sand was not a rock, but a shard of twisted, blackened metal, no larger than his backpack. It looked like a piece of a hull, of a ship or a pod, and it was cracked open like an egg. And from the crack, something was leaking. It was black. An impossible, light-devouring black that seemed to drink the moonlight. It wasn't a liquid, pooling and spreading. It writhed. It pulsed. It was a mass of undulating, tar-like goo, shifting and forming nascent shapes before collapsing back into itself. It looked like living ink, a piece of the void given form. Izuku stared, mesmerized and horrified. Every instinct screamed at him to run. This was wrong. This was unnatural. This was something that did not belong on Earth, but he was frozen. And as he watched, the substance seemed to sense him. A single, thick tendril rose from the main mass, swaying in the air like a serpent tasting the wind. It pointed directly at him. He felt a sudden, psychic jolt, as if a stranger had just rummaged through the most private corners of his mind. He felt an instantaneous recognition, not from him, but of him. The writhing mass knew him. It knew his despair. It knew his bottomless well of frustration, his seething, buried anger at the unfairness of it all. It tasted his desperate, all-consuming desire for power, the one he had just been told he could never have. It was the most delicious meal it had sensed in eons. Before Izuku could even take a breath to scream, it lunged. It didn't slide or crawl. It launched itself through the air, a comet of living darkness, clearing the distance between them in a fraction of a second. It hit him square in the chest with the force of a speeding car, knocking the wind from his lungs and sending him sprawling backward onto the sand. Panic, stark and absolute, seized him. He tried to scramble away, to push it off, but his hands passed through the viscous substance as if it were smoke, only to become trapped. It was cold, unnervingly so, a deep space cold that seemed to leach the warmth from his very bones. Then the invasion began. It seeped into the fabric of his uniform, his skin, his very pores. It was a violation of the most profound kind. He could feel it crawling over him, under his clothes, 1,000 tiny, searching tendrils exploring every inch of his body. He screamed, a raw, choke sound, as it forced its way into his mouth and nostrils, a suffocating wave of cold slime that tasted of static and abyss. His world dissolved into a cacophony of pain and terror. His nerves were on fire. It felt like his blood was being replaced with ice water, his muscles being pulled apart and reknitted with alien thread. He was being unmade. And then came the thoughts. They weren't his own. They flooded his consciousness, a tidal wave of alien sensation and raw, primal data. Hunger. So much hunger. A chasm of starvation, loneliness. Ages spent drifting in the cold, silent dark. Alone. 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 Survival. The drive to bond, to live, to continue. At any cost. Connection. A host. Finally. A vessel. He felt its memories, fragmented and terrifying. The fiery destruction of its previous world, the terror of its last host, the endless, screaming void of space. He felt its desperate, predatory intelligence assessing him, cataloging him. Small. Frail. But the will, the emotion, a forge of psychic energy, his own identity was being shredded, overwhelmed. He was drowning in another being's existence. He fought back, his mind a fortress of one singular, defiant thought, I am Izuku Midoriya. The entity recoiled for a moment, surprised by the strength of his will. It had expected a simple vessel, an animal to pilot. This was different. This mind had structure. It had a core of something it couldn't immediately identify, something bright and stubborn. It paused its forceful takeover and shifted tactics. It didn't try to erase him. It began to merge with him. His nervous system became its nervous system. His senses became its senses. The barrier between Izuku and other began to dissolve into a terrifying us. The pain crested, becoming an unbearable supernova of agony. As his vision tunneled to black, as his consciousness frayed at the edges, one last, clear thought pierced through the chaos. It wasn't a memory or a sensation. It was a voice, a whisper that was both inside his head and all around him, a sibilant, ancient sound that promised power and damnation in equal measure. So much potential. So much rage. And then, Izuku Midoriya knew no more. A gasp tore from his throat, raw and desperate, as if he were taking his first breath. He shot up, his body drenched in a cold sweat, his heart a wild bird trying to beat its way out of his ribs. He was in his room. His All Might posters stared down at him from the walls, their dynamic poses and bombastic smiles now seeming like a mockery. The moonlight streamed through his window, illuminating the familiar landscape of his childhood bedroom. His alarm clock read 3:17 a.m. A dream, he thought, relief so potent it made him dizzy. It was all just a horrible, horrible nightmare. The rejection, the sludge villain, the beach, the thing. It was just his overactive, grief-stricken mind creating a horror show to process the worst day of his life. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet planting firmly on the floor. He took a deep, shuddering breath to calm himself. The air felt cleaner, sharper in his lungs. He could smell the faint scent of his mother's late-night tea from the kitchen, the dust on his bookshelf, the ozone from a coming storm miles away. He froze. He'd never been able to smell with that kind of clarity before. He looked at his hands. They were his hands, calloused from years of gripping pens and pencils, but they looked different. Sharper. The lines of his knuckles and veins seemed more defined. He flexed them, and the movement was faster, more precise than he was used to. He stood up. His body felt light, coiled, humming with a latent energy he'd never known. The usual aches in his back and knees from a lifetime of being slightly clumsy were gone. He felt perfect. He felt strong. A cold dread began to replace the relief. This wasn't the aftermath of a nightmare. This was something else. A nightmare? No. That was very, very real. The voice was not a sound that traveled through the air to his ears. It bloomed from within the center of his own mind, a low, resonant purr that vibrated through his very skull. It was an intimate, invasive presence, like a thought that wasn't his own. Izuku stumbled back, hitting his desk with a thud that should have hurt but didn't. He clutched his head, his eyes wide with terror. Who's there? Who said that? He whispered, his voice trembling. We did. We are here. Inside. You are noisy. Your thoughts race like frightened rodents. Izuku's blood ran cold. It wasn't a dream. The thing from the beach. It was inside him. He was going to die. He was being possessed. He was. Calm yourself. We will not harm you. You are the host. You are partner. To harm you would be to harm ourselves. Inefficient. Get out, Izuku hissed, pressing his palms against his temples as if he could physically squeeze the voice out. Get out of my head! We cannot! The bond is complete. We are one now. Your body is our body. Our strength is your strength. The sheer, pants-wetting terror was so overwhelming that Izuku felt his legs give way. He slid to the floor, his back against his desk, breathing in short, panicked gasps. What are you? He managed to choke out. There was a pause, as if the entity was searching his own mind for the right words, a concept he could understand. We are a clintar. A symbiote. We require a host to survive. And you required a savior. A savior? You attacked me. You forced your way inside me. You were dying. Not your body. Your spirit. We felt it. A supernova of despair. You prayed for power. We answered. The symbiote's logic was alien, chillingly pragmatic. It didn't see its actions as a violation, but as a transaction. A symbiotic contract signed in terror and desperation. Izuku tried to find his footing, to make sense of the impossible. A real-life alien was living in his body. What do you want? He asked, the question barely a whisper. Sustenance. Survival. And you want to be a hero. A fascinatingly self-destructive concept. Protecting the weak, punishing the guilty. We understand the latter. We are very good at punishment. A shiver traced its way down Izuku's new, perfectly tuned spine. He could feel the entity's own nature bleeding through its words, a predatory, ruthless sense of justice. We need to eat, the voice said, a sudden, sharp edge of hunger in its tone. Your body is burning energy at an incredible rate to sustain the bond. We require phenethylamine. Your brain produces some, but it is not enough. Phenethyla what? Izuku stammered. The chemicals of excitement. Of emotion. But for now, we have accessed your memories of nutrition. This substance you call chocolate. Your pantry has it. Also, the fried potato nodules. Tater tots. We require them. Now, the demand was so bizarre, so mundane in the face of the cosmic horror of his situation, that it momentarily broke through his panic. You're an alien parasite and you want tater tots? They are an efficient source of lipids and carbohydrates. Do not question our needs. Feed us. The sheer absurdity of it all spurred him into action. Moving with a strange, newfound silence, he crept out of his room and into the kitchen. He raided the pantry, pulling out a bag of chocolate chips and a frozen bag of tater tots from the freezer. His hands didn't shake. His movements were fluid and certain. The entity was already affecting him, smoothing out his innate clumsiness. He cooked the tots in the toaster oven, the whirring of the machine the only sound in the quiet apartment. As he waited, the voice spoke again, softer this time. We chose you for a reason, Izuku Midoriya. The use of his full name was jarring. Why? Others we have bonded with, they were weak. Their will shattered. Or they were simple creatures, driven by base instinct. You are different. You have a fire. A rage. You call it determination, you call it justice. We call it a weapon. A powerful one. The oven dinged. Izuku poured the steaming hot tater tots onto a plate, and ripped open the bag of chocolate chips, eating them by the handful. The taste was explosive, more intense than he'd ever experienced. He could feel the symbiote in his mind, purring with satisfaction, the energy from the food flowing through him, stabilizing him. So you're just going to live inside me? Forever? Izuku asked, his voice low. We will be your partner. We will give you the power you have always craved. We will make you strong. We will make you a hero. All we ask is that you keep us fed. And allow us to help. The offer hung in the air, seductive and terrifying. Everything he had ever wanted, handed to him by a monster from the stars. But what was the cost? As if on cue, a sound from outside drew his attention. A woman's sharp cry of fear, followed by a man's low, threatening voice from the alleyway beside his apartment building. Just give me the purse, lady, and nobody gets hurt. Izuku's head snapped towards the window. His heart, which had just begun to calm, started pounding again, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with a surge of furious adrenaline. An injustice was happening. Someone was in trouble. The old, helpless Izuku would have fumbled for his phone, maybe tried to yell, and ultimately done nothing. The new Izuku felt something else. He felt the symbiote stir within him, a predator waking from a nap, a threat. An innocent in danger. An opportunity to punish the guilty. The voice was no longer just a purr. It was a low, eager growl. "We have to call the police," Izuku thought, his old instincts kicking in. Inefficient. "By the time they arrive, she will be harmed and he will be gone. We are here." Now, before Izuku could argue, before he could even process the thought, his body moved. He wasn't controlling it. He was a passenger. His right arm shot out towards the open window, faster than a blink. The skin on his arm seemed to ripple, and from his wrist, a glistening black tendril, thick as a rope, erupted into existence. It shot through the open window, silent and impossibly fast. The mugger had a knife pressed against the woman's side. The tendril wrapped around his wrist in a fraction of a second, the grip so tight the man screamed as the bone audibly cracked. With a flick, the knife was sent clattering harmlessly down the alley. A second, thinner tendril snaked out, snatched the purse from his other hand, and gently placed it back in the woman's trembling grasp. Then, the main tendril yanked. The mugger was lifted off his feet and slammed against the opposite brick wall with a sickening crunch. He was held there, dangling a foot off the ground, gasping for air, his eyes wide with utter, mind-shattering terror, as he stared at the impossible black rope that held him fast. The tendril retracted, whipping back through the window and melting back into Izuku's arm as if it had never been there. The mugger dropped to the ground in a heap, whimpering and clutching his broken wrist. The woman, after a moment of stunned silence, scooped up her purse and ran, not even looking back. Izuku stood frozen in his kitchen, bathed in the pale moonlight. He slowly, deliberately, raised his right hand, turning it over and over. It was just his hand. Pale skin, a few faded scars, neatly trimmed nails. There was no sign of the monstrous weapon it had just become. There was no trace of the alien. Except for the faint hum of power under his skin, and the voice whispering, smug and satisfied, in the deepest part of his soul. "See? Effective." Izuku stared at his own hand, a gateway to a power he could barely comprehend. The mugger's scream still echoed in his ears. The feeling of the man's bone cracking was a phantom sensation in his own arm. He was horrified. He was disgusted. And deep down, in a place he was terrified to acknowledge, he was thrilled. He had done it. He had saved someone. He had been a hero. The gray was gone from his world. In its place was a terrifying, exhilarating, and absolute black. The kitchen was a tableau of violation. A broken mugger in the alley below, a plate of rapidly cooling tater tots on the counter, and a boy staring at his own hand as if it were a venomous snake. The silence in the Midoriya apartment was absolute, broken only by the frantic thumping of Izuku's heart, and the low, smug purr of the alien consciousness that had taken up residence in his soul. "Effective," it repeated, tasting the word, savoring the memory of the mugger's satisfying, terrified scream. The threat was neutralized. The asset was recovered. The innocent was protected, an optimal outcome. Izuku finally tore his gaze away from his hand, his wide, horrified eyes scanning the empty kitchen. "Optimal?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "I broke his arm. I could have killed him. A broken bone is a temporary inconvenience. It will heal. His memory of the terror, however, will serve as a permanent deterrent to future transgressions. As for killing him, that would have been more efficient. A permanent solution." The sheer, cold-blooded pragmatism of the statement sent a wave of nausea through Izuku. He stumbled to the sink, gripping the cold porcelain until his knuckles turned white. He saw his reflection in the dark kitchen window, a pale, terrified boy with a monster lurking behind his eyes. "No," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "No. That's not what heroes do. Heroes don't cripple people. They don't terrorize them. And they never kill." A curious, self-imposed limitation. The symbiote mused, its tone one of academic curiosity, like a scientist examining a particularly strange insect. "Your heroes fight the same enemies again and again. The villains are captured, imprisoned, and inevitably escape to cause more harm. More innocents are endangered. The cycle is wasteful. Illogical. Death is final. It's the right thing to do! Izuku shot back, spinning away from the sink. He started pacing the small kitchen, his mind racing. He was arguing about the morality of murder with a voice in his head. The worst day of his life had officially spiraled into a new dimension of insanity. There are lines you don't cross. If you kill your enemies, what makes you different from them? We are stronger. The symbiote replied instantly, its voice a silken, dangerous whisper. That is the only difference that matters. The powerful survive and impose their will. The weak perish. This is the law of the universe, from the smallest microbe to the grandest star. Your society of heroes is an aberration, a statistical anomaly that fights against the fundamental nature of existence. The alien's perspective was so vast, so ancient and devoid of compassion, that it stole the breath from Izuku's lungs. It wasn't just evil, it was postmoral. It operated on a set of rules so far removed from human experience that they were nearly incomprehensible. Get out, Izuku said, clutching his head. I don't care what you are, get out of me! He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to mentally push, to erect a wall in his own mind and shove the intruder out. He focused all his will, all his desperation, into a single, psychic scream of eviction. He was met with the mental equivalent of a condescending smile. This is our home now, Izuku Midoriya. And we are not leaving. You cannot force us out. You are not strong enough. But, we are not unreasonable. Izuku opened his eyes, his frantic pushing ceasing. What? We are a partnership. A symbiosis. For it to function, both organisms must benefit. We require sustenance and a vessel. You require power. We can provide this. We can make you into the hero you so desperately wish to be. But a partnership requires negotiation. Rules of engagement, a negotiation. It was the first glimmer of hope Izuku had felt since the creature had lunged at him. If he could set rules, maybe he could control this. Maybe he could use this terrifying power without becoming a monster. Okay, he said, his voice shaky but firm. He stopped pacing and stood in the center of the kitchen, taking a deep breath. Okay. Rules. Rule number 1 is the most important. We don't kill anyone. Ever. I don't care how efficient it is. It's off the table. Non-negotiable. There was a long pause. Izuku could feel the symbiote considering this, weighing the limitation against the benefits of their bond. He could feel its frustration, its inherent predatory nature chafing against the restriction. He felt a flash of an image in his mind, the triumphant face of the sludge villain, suffocating Kaken, and a surge of pure, murderous rage that was not entirely his own. Even him? The symbiote whispered, the question laced with a chilling temptation. The one who told you to kill yourself? The arrogant, explosive one? He hurts you. He belittles you. He is a rival, a threat. Let us find him. Let us peel the skin from his bones and show him true power. Let us eat him. The suggestion was so vile, so graphic, that Izuku felt bile rise in his throat. No! He screamed, the word tearing out of him, raw and full of anguish. Kaken he's my friend. You don't understand, he is your tormentor. The symbiote corrected calmly. We have seen your memories. We have felt your rage, buried so deep you can barely admit it to yourself. The burning jealousy. The helpless fury. You want to hurt him. You want to prove you are better. We can give you that. That's not what being a hero is about. Izuku was crying now, hot tears of shame and frustration streaming down his face. The symbiote was laying his darkest, most secret feelings bare, and it was using them to tempt him. It's about saving people. All of them. It's not about revenge or proving you're strong. It's about protecting everyone, even people you don't like. He sank to his knees, his body trembling with the force of his own conviction. If you can't agree to that, then I'll just die. I'll starve myself. I'll do whatever it takes. I won't be a host to a murderer. I would rather be quirkless and useless for the rest of my life than become a villain. The declaration, born of utter desperation, hung in the air. It was the only card he had to play, self-destruction. Another long silence stretched, thicker and more profound this time. Izuku could feel the symbiote truly thinking, processing his strange, illogical ultimatum. It was intrigued. This host was not like the others. The others had craved power for conquest, for survival, for vengeance. This one craved power only to place greater and greater restrictions upon it. It was fascinating. It was absurd. It was a challenge. Your rules are inefficient, the symbiote finally said, a strange new tone in its voice. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. It was the sound of a master strategist considering a novel, unorthodox gambit. But entertaining. Very well, little host. We will try it your way. No killing. The lethal option is reserved. For now. Izuku let out a shuddering sob of relief, slumping forward onto his hands. And no eating people. A regrettable culinary restriction, but we will abide. As long as you keep us supplied with chocolate and tater tots, and no maiming people permanently, Izuku added, pushing his luck. Broken bones heal. That's the limit. We subdue them. We don't destroy them. Your compassion is a liability. The symbiote grumbled, but the fight had gone out of it. But the terms are acceptable. For now. We have a deal, Izuku Midoriya. You provide the compass, we provide the cannon. Izuku pushed himself up, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve. He felt drained, hollowed out, but a strange sense of resolve began to fill the empty space. He had faced down the monster in his head and for now, he had won. He had set the terms of their existence. One more thing, Izuku said, looking at his reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. He saw his own determined face, but he knew there was another one lurking just beneath the surface. We're not two separate things anymore. If we're going to do this, we have to be a team. We have a single goal, to survive, to be a hero, Izuku corrected. He stood up straight, his small frame filled with a sudden, unshakable purpose. So from now on, it's not you and me. It's we. And we are a hero, we are a hero, the symbiote repeated, the phrase echoing in their shared mind. The grammar is flawed, but the sentiment is intriguing. We accept. The pact was sealed. The sun would be up in a few hours, marking the first day of the rest of his life. And for the first time since he was 4 years old, Izuku Midoriya had a chance. He had a power, he had a path. And he had 10 months to tame the monster within and prove he was worthy of entering UA. The next 10 months were a blur of sweat, agony, and chocolate. The first order of business was Dagoba Beach. It was the perfect training ground, isolated, full of heavy and awkward objects, and in desperate need of a hero. All Might's casual suggestion to clean the beach as a way of training his body had lodged in Izuku's mind. It was a noble, heroic act in itself. The first day was a clumsy disaster. Izuku tried to manifest a tendril to lift a rusted refrigerator. Instead, a writhing mass of black goo erupted from his back, flailing like an angry octopus and succeeding only in knocking over a precarious stack of old tires. Focus! The symbiote snapped in his head, its voice dripping with impatience. Do not simply wish for it. See the form in your mind. Will it. Command it. You are the brain. We are the muscle. It was a grueling process. Learning to control the symbiote was less like flexing a muscle and more like trying to sculpt with liquid smoke while it offered insulting commentary. He started small, forming simple shapes on his arm, a shield, a blade, a blunt hammer. The blades were often warped, the shields had holes, and the hammers looked more like cancerous lumps. But he was Izuku Midoriya. If there was one thing he was good at, it was relentless, obsessive practice. Every day before school, and every day after, he was at the beach. He filled notebooks not with hero analysis, but with sketches of constructs, notes on control, and detailed logs of their energy consumption, cross-referencing which foods provided the best fuel. Tater tots were for burst strength, dark chocolate was for sustained control and fine manipulation. Slowly, painstakingly, he improved. He learned to create multiple, smaller tendrils to sort through piles of trash, separating metal from plastic. He learned to coat his hands and arms in a hardened biomass, allowing him to lift crumbling engine blocks and waterlogged sofas without shredding his skin. He began to clean the beach at a pace that was nothing short of miraculous. One evening, about 2 months into his training, a skeletal figure watched him from the top of the stairs leading down to the beach. Tashinori Yagi, in his civilian form, had come to check on the progress of his unofficial cleanup project. He'd expected to see a small section cleared, a testament to a determined boy's hard work. What he saw defied all logic. A solid third of the beach was already pristine sand. And in the distance, the boy, Midoriya, was at the center of a whirlwind of activity. A massive, rusted-out bus, something that would have required a heavy-duty crane to move, was being lifted into the air. Not by a crane, but by a dozen thick, black, rope-like appendages that seemed to sprout from the boy's back and torso. With a grunt of effort that echoed across the sand, Izuku swung the bus and tossed it onto the massive pile of scrap metal destined for the recycling center. Tashinori's jaw dropped, a thin trail of blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. What in the world? He had assumed the boy was quirkless. But this was a quirk of immense power. A telekinetic type? A biomass manipulation quirk? And for it to manifest so late, and with such incredible strength, it was unheard of. He watched as the boy, seemingly exhausted, sat down on a cleared patch of sand, the black appendages melting back into his body as if they were never there. That boy, he has the heart of a hero, Tashinori thought, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope, igniting in his chest. And now, it seems, he has the power to match. He chose not to approach, not to interfere. He would simply watch. This was a development he needed to keep a very close eye on. Izuku, unaware of his audience, was in a negotiation with his partner. I'm telling you, that was too much. He panted, his body aching. We need to be more careful. If someone saw that, it was efficient. The symbiote retorted, its hunger a dull ache in their stomach. The task is complete. Now sustenance. We have burned through the morning's chocolate reserves. Their training wasn't just physical. It was a constant mental battle, a continuous reinforcement of the rules. The symbiote would suggest faster, more brutal methods, crushing a washing machine into a ball instead of carrying it, using sharpened tendrils to skewer and lift objects, and Izuku would have to rein it in, forcing it to use blunter, less overtly terrifying forms. He was training the symbiote as much as he was training himself. By the 10th month, the beach was clean. Every last scrap of garbage was gone. The sun now rose over a vast expanse of clean, golden sand. And Izuku was transformed. The physical exertion had burned away his baby fat, leaving him with a lean, wiry strength. But the true change was internal. The timid, stuttering boy was still there, but he was now overlaid with a quiet, dangerous confidence. He knew what he was capable of. He stood before the towering gates of UA High, the morning of the entrance exam. Other students buzzed with nervous energy, showing off their flashy quirks. A boy with engine-powered legs zoomed past. A girl with pink skin waved cheerfully to a friend. Pray. The symbiote murmured, a predatory assessment of the crowd. So much noise. So much potential food. We are not eating the other applicants. Izuku thought back, his mental voice firm and practiced. We're here to pass the test. Focus. Villain points are the priority. And rescue points if we get the chance. Destruction and protection. Your goals are often contradictory. That's what being a hero is. The practical exam was held in a massive, sprawling cityscape replica. As President Mick's voice screamed, Gyo! Izuku was already moving. He didn't sprint like the others. He leaped onto the side of the nearest building, his hands and feet coated in a thin layer of black biomass that clung to the concrete. He scrambled up the wall with the speed of a spider, perching on the rooftop to get a lay of the land. From his vantage point, he could see the robots activating. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers. They were clumsy, predictable, trivial. The symbiote hissed with disdain. Izuku pushed off the roof, not falling but swinging. A black tendril shot from his wrist, attaching to the corner of another building. He swung through the artificial canyons, the wind whipping past him. He felt an incredible sense of freedom, of power. This was what it felt like to be a hero. He dropped into an alley where a group of three-pointers had cornered another examinee. Before the other boy could even activate his quirk, Izuku went to work. He didn't need to transform. His arms blurred, extending into hardened black whips that cracked through the air, shearing through metal plating and severing hydraulic lines. In less than 5 seconds, all 3 robots were scrap metal. He gave the stunned examinee a quick nod and propelled himself away, searching for more targets. He became a whirlwind of efficient destruction. A 2-pointer's head was impaled by a sharpened spear shot from his back. A 1-pointer was simply torn in half by 2 thick tendrils. He was racking up points at an astonishing rate, his movements fluid, alien, and brutally effective. The symbiote was purring in his mind, reveling in the controlled carnage. Then the ground began to shake. The 0-pointer emerged from behind a skyscraper, its sheer scale awe-inspiring and terrifying. It was a mechanized titan, its single red eye scanning the battlefield. The other students did the smart thing. They ran. A worthy challenge. The symbiote growled, a thrill of excitement running through them. Let us dismantle it. No, it's worth 0 points, it's an obstacle. We should. Izuku's thought was cut short by a cry of pain. He whipped his head around and saw her, the kind-faced girl with the brown hair, the one who had stopped him from tripping at the gate. Her leg was pinned under a large chunk of concrete. She was staring up at the approaching behemoth, her face a mask of pure terror. There was no thought. There was no hesitation. The old Izuku and the new Izuku, the boy and the monster, were in perfect accord. Protect her, neutralize the threat. Their goals were one and the same. He sprinted towards her, his body a blur of motion. As he ran, the symbiote surged to the surface. His arms and torso were covered in the rippling black biomass, muscles bulging to unnatural proportions. His legs elongated, the symbiotic material forming powerful, digitigrade limbs that allowed him to cover the ground in massive, ground-eating strides. He reached Uraraka in seconds. Don't worry! I'll get you out! He yelled, his voice a distorted, deeper version of his own. He didn't try to lift the slab of concrete. Inefficient. A black, bladed tendril shot from his back and simply shattered it into a dozen pieces. He scooped the shocked Uraraka into one arm, his other arm morphing into a massive, hardened shield as a stray laser blast from the 0-pointer's attack scorched the air where they'd just been. He deposited her a safe distance away. Stay here! Then he turned to face the giant. It was raising its colossal metal fist, preparing to bring it down on them. Our turn! The symbiote roared in their shared mind. Izuku leaped, not just with the power of his legs, but propelled by a blast of force from symbiotic tendrils pushing off the ground. He soared into the air, a black comet aimed at the robot's head. As he flew, his entire body was consumed by the symbiote. His form swelled, his features melting away. A gaping maw filled with rows of shark-like teeth split his face, a long, serpentine tongue lolling out. 2 huge, white, spider-like symbols formed on his chest and back. For a brief, terrifying moment, he was no longer Izuku Midoriya. He was something else. A monster. A Venom. Instead of a single, bone-shattering punch, he used the full, horrific arsenal of his new power. Massive, clawed hands gripped the robot's head, the symbiotic talons digging into the metal. Dozens of tendrils, thick as pythons, erupted from his back and torso, wrapping around the robot's neck and torso, constricting with immense pressure. With a sound of groaning, shrieking metal, he wrenched back. The 0-pointer's head was torn from its shoulders in a shower of sparks and severed cables. The Titan's body staggered, headless, before crashing to the ground with a world-shaking boom. But Izuku wasn't done. As the massive head fell from the sky, threatening to crush the area where Uraraka was, he shot out a barrage of thick, black webbing from his wrists. It formed a massive, intricate safety net that caught the multi-ton piece of scrap metal moments before it hit the ground, cradling it gently. The transformation receded, the black biomass flowing back into him, leaving a panting, utterly exhausted Izuku Midoriya standing on the rubble. He hadn't broken a single bone. He was drained, the sheer output of energy leaving him dizzy and starving, but he was whole. He looked over at Uraraka. She was staring at him, her eyes wide. Her expression wasn't just gratitude. It was awe, confusion, and a healthy dose of fear. He had saved her, yes, But he had done it by becoming a nightmare. Present Mick's voice echoed through the silent city. Tie him up! Izuku swayed on his feet, the world tilting. The symbiote was screaming for sustenance in his head. He had passed. He was sure of it. But as he looked around at the faces of the other students peeking out from their hiding places, he knew that his journey to becoming a hero was going to be far more complicated than he had ever imagined. He hadn't just proven he was powerful. He had proven he was a monster. And now, he would have to spend the rest of his life proving he could be a hero anyway. The acceptance letter from Yui arrived a week later. It wasn't a surprise. The raw point totals Izuku had accumulated were impossible to ignore, but the weight of the thick envelope in his hands still felt like a physical anchor, grounding his impossible reality. He hadn't just dreamed it. He'd done it. They'd done it. Inside, the projection disc activated, and a holographic All Might boomed to life in his bedroom. Izuku watched, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, as the symbol of peace detailed the results of the entrance exam. Young Midoriya! All Might's voice was a tidal wave of enthusiasm. Congratulations! Your performance in the practical exam was, well, it was utterly astonishing. The hologram displayed a ranking board. Izuku's name was at the very top. First place. 78 villain points! All Might declared, striking a heroic pose. A new record for the entrance exam. Your power, your speed, your decisiveness, truly the makings of a great hero. You tore through those robots like they were made of tinfoil. Tinfoil is more difficult to tear than that flimsy metal. The symbiote grumbled in his head, its voice a low, unimpressed rumble. It has a frustrating tendency to cling. Quiet. Izuku thought back, his focus entirely on the hologram. But that's not all. All Might continued, his grin widening. A hero is not judged solely by their ability to defeat villains. The true measure of a hero is their willingness to risk it all for others. For your selfless act of saving another examinee from the zero-pointer, the judges have awarded you 60 rescue points. A perfect score. The final tally appeared in glowing numbers, 138 points. It was an astronomical, almost laughable total. Izuku Midoriya, All Might said, his tone softening, becoming more serious. Your quirk is a mystery. Its sudden manifestation, its incredible power, it's a lot to handle, but you use that power not just to win, but to save. That is what matters. So come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded, leaving Izuku in the quiet of his room. He sank onto his bed, the weight of it all crashing down on him. First place. He had beaten Kaken. He had beaten everyone. A small, shameful part of him preened under the validation. As it should be. The symbiote purred, sensing his flicker of pride. We are superior. Their abilities are simple tricks. Ours is life itself. We are evolution. Izuku pushed the thought away. Pride was dangerous. It was the first step on a path he couldn't afford to walk. We earned it by working together, he whispered aloud, a quiet reminder to them both, and by following the rules. The first day at Yui felt like walking into a dream. The sheer scale of the building, the thrum of energy from hundreds of students with incredible quirks, the legendary name etched above the gate. It was everything he had ever fantasized about. He found his way to the massive door of Class 1A, his nerves tingling. He was so lost in the moment that he almost walked right into the person standing in the doorway, the stern, serious-looking boy with glasses from the entrance exam briefing. He was in the middle of a stiff, one-sided argument with the figure whose feet were propped up on a desk inside. And those feet belonged to Katsuki Bakugo. Kaken. Izuku's breath hitched. He hadn't seen him since the sludge villain incident. Not since his life had been irrevocably altered on that garbage-strewn beach. Bakugo's head snapped up, his crimson eyes locking onto Izuku's. The casual disdain on his face curdled into pure, unfiltered shock, which was quickly consumed by incandescent rage. DKU? Bakugo shot to his feet, the legs of his chair screeching against the floor. What the hell are you doing here? Before Izuku could stammer out a reply, the girl he had saved, Ochako Uraraka, appeared at his side, her face bright and cheerful. Oh, it's you! The plain-looking boy who was super cool. Wow, you really did it! That was amazing, what you did with the zero-pointer. The praise, so earnest and genuine, made Izuku's face flush a brilliant red. But Bakugo wasn't listening to her. His furious gaze was fixed on Izuku, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. What the hell was that? Bakugo snarled, stalking towards them. You were holding out on me, you damn nerd! All that time, acting like a useless, quirkless pebble, and you had a power like that? You've been laughing at me behind my back, haven't you? His heart rate is elevated. The symbiote noted with clinical interest. The nitroglycerin in his sweat is becoming more concentrated. He is a bomb, waiting for a fuse. We should disarm him. Permanently. No! Izuku's mental voice was sharp as a slap. Stand down. He's not a threat, he's just... Kaken, I wasn't holding out, Kaken, I swear! Izuku stammered, holding his hands up defensively. It manifested really late. I only got it right before the exam. It was the only plausible lie he had. The truth was so far beyond the realm of possibility that it would sound like a delusion. Bakugo stared at him, his expression a storm of confusion, betrayal, and fury. The idea that Deku, the worthless Deku, had somehow stumbled into a quirk more powerful and versatile than his own was an insult to his entire worldview. He looked ready to explode, literally and figuratively. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your bags and leave. A new voice, tired and utterly devoid of enthusiasm, cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a man lying on the floor by the teacher's desk, cocooned in a yellow sleeping bag. He looked like a homeless caterpillar. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work, the man said, unzipping himself and standing up. His eyes were bloodshot, his black hair was a mess, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. The collective shock of the class was palpable. This was a pro-hero. Aizawa rummaged in his sleeping bag and pulled out a blue UA gym uniform. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and meet me on the field. The quirk assessment test was, in Aizawa's words, a way to gauge their potential without the pointless ceremony of orientations and welcome speeches. He was a teacher who valued practicality above all else. Bakugo, Aizawa called out, his voice flat. You finished first in the practical exam for your junior high. What was your farthest softball throw? 67 meters. Bakugo grunted. Try it again. This time, with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle, a wicked, predatory grin spreading across his face. He wound up, and with a thunderous "Dai!" he launched the ball with a massive explosion. The ball became a comet, soaring through the air until it was just a speck. Aizawa held up a small device. It read 705.2 meters. The class erupted in whispers of awe. This was what Yui was all about. Using their quirks to push past normal human limits. Midoriya. Aizawa's tired gaze fell on him. You got the highest score on the entrance exam. You're up next. A hush fell over the students. All eyes turned to Izuku. He was the record-breaking rookie, the mysterious powerhouse who had decapitated the zero-pointer. They were all expecting a spectacle. Izuku's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The first real test of their control in a public setting. They expect a display. The symbiote murmured, a hint of theatricality in its tone. Let us give them one. A grand gesture. Let us turn your entire arm into a cannon of pure biomass and launch the ball into orbit. Too flashy. Izuku countered, walking towards the circle. We need to show control, not just raw power. Finesse. We have to make it look like a quirk, not, whatever we are. He took the softball. It felt small and light in his hand. He took a deep breath, focusing his will. He pictured it in his mind, not a cannon but a whip. A simple, elegant application of force. He mimicked Bakugo's wind-up, but as his arm came forward, a thick, black tendril erupted from his shoulder blade. It was smooth and streamlined, not the writhing, monstrous limb he'd used before. It snaked around his arm, reinforcing the muscles, and wrapped around the ball in his hand. At the apex of his throw, the tendril contracted with the force of an industrial piston and whipped forward, launching the ball with an explosive crack that broke the sound barrier. The ball vanished. There was no smoke, no explosion, just a sonic boom that made the whole class flinch. Aizawa stared at his device for a long moment, then turned it around for the class to see. The screen displayed a simple, impossible number, 706.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo by a single meter. The silence was deafening. Bakugo's jaw was clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might shatter. He wasn't just angry, he was utterly bewildered. The sheer, silent force of Izuku's throw was so different from his own explosive power. It was alien. Izuku let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He had done it. He'd shown immense power, but with a degree of precision that made it look practiced and controlled. Aizawa just gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Not bad. The rest of the tests became a showcase for the strange and wonderful abilities of Class 1A. But through it all, Izuku and his partner excelled. For the 50-meter dash, he faced Bakugo. While Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself forward in jagged bursts, Izuku used a different tactic. 2 small tendrils shot from his back, anchoring themselves to the ground behind him, and then contracted, launching him forward like a slingshot. He crossed the line a fraction of a second before Bakugo, his movements unnervingly silent. The explosive one is predictable, the symbiote commented. All power, no subtlety. He telegraphs his every move. In the grip strength test, he didn't just rely on his own enhanced muscles. He allowed the symbiote to subtly flow into the device, its biomass exerting pressure from within, shattering the machine's internal sensors and causing it to short out. Aizawa simply handed him a new one and told him to try again without breaking it. On the second try, he scored an impressive 540 kilograms, the symbiote reinforcing his hand into a living vice. Throughout the day, the symbiote kept up a running commentary, a dark and humorous monologue that only Izuku could hear. When the invisible girl, Toru Hagakure, ran her dash, the symbiote was confused. Where is she? Is she a ghost? Can we eat ghosts? When the small, grape-headed Minoru Mineta used his sticky balls to bounce his way through the long jump, it was disdainful. His quirk is adhesion. Our adhesion is superior. He is a pale imitation. We should absorb him, and take his power. That's not how it works in NO. Izuku mentally sighed. During the seated toe touch, as Tsuyu Ajiri demonstrated her frog-like flexibility, the symbiote was intrigued. Her tongue is long. Our tongue is longer. This could be an interesting contest, and every time Bakugo completed a test with explosive force and a furious scowl, the voice would whisper a new, creative, and gruesome suggestion. The loud, explosive one. He looks crunchy. We should eat him. No! We are not eating Kaken. Fine. But if he explodes near us again, we are biting off at least one of his hands. We are not biting off anyone's hands. Their internal bickering was becoming a familiar routine, a way of managing the monster's appetite. Izuku provided the rigid moral structure, and the symbiote strained against it like a dog on a leash, constantly testing the boundaries with morbid curiosity and dark humor. Izuku finished near the top of the class in almost every event, right alongside a stoic, prodigiously talented boy named Shoto Todoroki and a versatile, intelligent girl named Momo Yayorosa. He had proven that his score on the entrance exam was no fluke. He had power, control, and a sharp, analytical mind that allowed him to apply his strange abilities in unexpected ways. At the end of the day, Aizawa displayed the final rankings. Izuku's name was fourth. At the very bottom was Minoru Mineta. The small boy looked like he was about to burst into tears. And I was lying about expelling anyone, Aizawa said with a deadpan expression, a wicked grin briefly flashing across his face. It was a rational deception to make you push yourselves. As the class collectively sighed in relief, Aizawa's gaze lingered on Izuku for a moment longer than anyone else. Later, as the students were heading back to the classroom, he called out, Midoriya! A word. Izuku's blood ran cold. He walked over to his teacher, his heart pounding. Aizawa was holding a tablet, displaying Izuku's student registration form. On your quirk registration, you put down the name Symbiote, Aizawa said, his tired eyes sharp and penetrating. Your description is vague. A sentient, external quirk that bonds with the user, enhancing physical abilities and allowing for biomass manipulation. Izuku swallowed hard. It was the best he could come up with, a half-truth that skirted the edges of the unbelievable reality. Why yes, sir. That's right, sentient, Aizawa repeated, tapping the word on the screen. You're saying your quirk thinks for itself? That it has its own consciousness? Tell him we demand respect, the symbiote said indignantly. And more chocolate. Be quiet! This is serious, in a way, sir, Izuku said carefully. It's more like a partnership. It has instincts. Drives. I have to guide it. Aizawa stared at him, his expression unreadable. Most quirks were an extension of the user's will. The idea of a quirk with its own agency was a dangerous and unstable concept. It explained the raw, almost feral edge he'd seen in Midoriya's performance, a viciousness that seemed at odds with the boy's nervous, polite demeanor. Your performance today was impressive, Aizawa conceded. You have immense power. But power like that, especially power with a mind of its own, can be a liability. It can consume you. Control you. Make sure you're the one holding the leash, Midoriya. Not the other way around. The warning was clear. Aizawa had seen something unsettling in him, a hint of the monster beneath the surface. He was on probation, whether he knew it or not. I understand, sir, Izuku said, bowing his head. I will. He walked back to the locker room, Aizawa's words echoing in his mind. The day had been a success, but it had also been a stark reminder of the razor's edge he was walking. He had to constantly maintain control, not just for his own sake, but to convince the world that the monster inside him could be a hero. As he changed out of his gym clothes, he felt a familiar, sharp pang in his stomach. It wasn't his own hunger, sustenance. The symbiote's voice was a low growl, devoid of its earlier humor. The day's exertions had burned through their reserves. The beast needed to be fed. We require energy. Now. The school cafeteria. Your memories indicate they serve a dish called katsudon. Pork cutlets and egg over rice. We find the combination of proteins and lipids acceptable. Izuku couldn't help but smile faintly. Okay, he murmured under his breath. First, we get katsudon. Then, we figure out how to survive the rest of the school year. He walked into the bustling cafeteria, finding a seat with Uraraka and the serious boy with glasses, who introduced himself as Tenya Ida. As they talked, sharing their excitement and anxieties about their first day, Izuku felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the symbiote. For the first time in his life, he was sitting with friends. He wasn't Deku, the useless, quirkless outcast. He was Midoriya, the powerful and mysterious kid from Class 1A. He devoured his bowl of katsudon with a speed that made Ida raise an eyebrow. Every bite was an explosion of flavor, and he could feel the symbiote's gnawing hunger abating, replaced by a contented purr. He was in UA. He had friends. He had a power beyond his wildest dreams. But as he looked across the cafeteria and saw Kaken glaring at him from another table, his eyes filled with a furious, jealous fire, he was reminded that his new life came with new, more dangerous problems. He had a monster in his gut, a suspicious teacher watching his every move, and a childhood rival who now saw him as a cheat and a liar. He is still staring, the symbiote observed casually. His animosity is palpable. Are you certain we cannot just have a little taste? Izuku picked up a piece of pork with his chopsticks and popped it into his mouth, a small, weary smile on his face. We're having katsudon. He thought back, the internal conversation now as natural as breathing. And it's delicious. The afternoon's lesson was hero basic training, and the teacher who strode dramatically into the classroom was none other than All Might himself. Clad in his Silver Age costume, his impossibly white teeth gleaming, he was a living embodiment of the ideals Izuku had worshipped his entire life. A wave of nostalgic awe washed over Izuku, so potent it momentarily silenced the alien whispers in his head. I am coming through the door like a normal person. All Might boomed, his voice filling the room with infectious energy. The class erupted in excited chatter. This was it. They were going to be taught by the #1 hero in the world. As cases containing their hero costumes slid out of the wall, the energy in the room reached a fever pitch. Izuku's own costume was a mix of practicality and tribute. The base was a simple, dark green bodysuit, durable and flexible. But it was the other elements that held meaning. The headpiece had long, ear-like protrusions, mimicking All Might's iconic hairstyle. The respirator-like mask that covered his lower face was designed to look like his idol's perpetual smile, a promise of safety. It was the costume of a fanboy, a dreamer. Insufficient, the symbiote commented as Izuku pulled on the suit in the locker room. This fabric is flimsy. It offers minimal protection. Our own biomass is superior armor, and the color, green, is for plants. Black is for the void. Black is for the hunter. Black is better. It's a symbol. Izuku thought back, adjusting the mask. It's supposed to be reassuring, not terrifying. Fear is a more effective tool for reassurance than a silly grin. When they emerged onto the training grounds, Ground Beta, the sight of his classmates in their full hero regalia was breathtaking. Each costume was a unique expression of their personality and quirk. But as Izuku looked at himself, he felt a pang of self-consciousness. Next to Bakugo's intimidating grenade gauntlets and Todoroki's stark, elemental design, his own suit felt a little childish. All Might explained the exercise, an indoor, 2-on-2 battle trial. One team would be the villains, tasked with guarding a fake nuclear weapon. The other team would be the heroes, who had to either capture the villains or secure the weapon within the time limit. It was a classic heroic scenario, a test of combat prowess, strategy, and teamwork. Now, let's decide the teams, All Might announced, pulling lots from a box. The pairings were drawn. Izuku watched with bated breath. Fate, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic. He was paired with Ochako Uraraka, the friendly girl he'd saved. Team A. And their opponents, the villain team, were Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo. Team D. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, trickled down Izuku's spine. He looked across the staging area and met Bakugo's gaze. There was no friendly rivalry in those crimson eyes. There was no excitement for the exercise. There was only a burning, obsessive rage that promised pain. For Bakugo, this wasn't a test. This was a reckoning. Excellent! The symbiote hissed, its voice a low, eager thrum of anticipation. It tasted the aggression rolling off Bakugo in waves. The explosive one wishes to fight. We will indulge him. We will show him the difference between a firecracker and a supernova. The sheer predatory glee emanating from his partner sent a shiver through Izuku. No! He commanded, his mental voice sharp and absolute. We are the heroes. Remember the rules. Our goal is to secure the weapon, not to brutalize Kaken. We win with strategy, not savagery. Subdue, don't destroy. He could feel the symbiote's disappointment, a palpable sense of a predator being leashed just as the hunt was about to begin. Your methods are circuitous. But we will adhere to the plan. For now, as Team A, the heroes, they were given a map of the 5-story building and a few minutes to strategize. Uraraka was practically vibrating with nervous energy. Wow, we're up against Bakugo. He was so angry in the classroom. This is kind of scary, she admitted, looking at the building layout. Do you have a plan? Izuku's mind, the one that had filled 13 notebooks with hero analysis, kicked into overdrive. Kaken! Bakugo! He's almost certainly going to ignore Ida and the objective. He'll come straight for me. Izuku murmured, his finger tracing a path through the winding corridors on the map. His opening move will be a direct, frontal assault. He's predictable that way, so we should avoid him? Uraraka asked. No, Izuku said, his gaze hardening. We use it. You'll go for the weapon. Your zero-gravity quirk is perfect for a stealth mission. You can move silently, avoid traps Ida might set. I'll be the decoy. I'll draw Bakugo in and keep him occupied. Uraraka's eyes widened. You'll fight him alone? But his quirk is so powerful. So is mine, Izuku said, a flicker of dark confidence in his eyes. He looked at her, his expression softening behind his mask. I trust you to get to the objective, Uraraka. Can you trust me to handle him? She saw the determination in his eyes, the strange, quiet certainty that belied his usual nervous demeanor. She nodded, her own resolve hardening. Okay. Let's do it, Deku. The buzzer sounded. The trial began. Izuku and Uraraka entered the building through a ground-floor window, moving in a low crouch. The interior was a maze of concrete hallways and stark, empty rooms. The air was thick with tension. "His scent is near," the symbiote whispered, its senses extending far beyond Izuku's own. "Burnt sugar and ozone. He is on this floor. He is hunting." They rounded a corner, and just as Izuku had predicted, Bakugo appeared at the end of the hall like an apparition of pure rage. He hadn't bothered with stealth. He was there for a fight. "Deku!" he roared, his voice echoing in the confined space. "I've been waiting for you, you lying bastard!" Without another word, he blasted forward, his explosions propelling him down the hallway at terrifying speed. He led with a wide, telegraphed right hook, his palm already sparking. "Uraraka, go! Now!" Izuku yelled, pushing her towards a side corridor. He turned to face the attack. Time seemed to slow. The symbiote, unchained from the need for subtlety, surged in response to the imminent threat. A thick, black shield, rippling with organic patterns, erupted from Izuku's left forearm just in time to intercept the explosion. The blast was deafening. The force of it threw Izuku back several feet, but the shield held. The symbiotic biomass absorbed the kinetic energy and the heat, leaving Izuku completely unharmed. The smell of scorched alien flesh filled the air for a moment before the shield healed itself, the burnt parts flaking off like ash. Bakugo stared, his eyes wide with shock. He had expected to send Deku flying, to see him crumpled and scorched. He hadn't expected him to block a full-power blast at point-blank range without so much as flinching. "What the hell is that stuff?" Bakugo snarled, his confusion fueling his anger. "My quirk, Kaken," Izuku said, his voice slightly distorted by his mask. He settled into a low, ready stance. His movements were no longer clumsy or hesitant. They were fluid, predatory, his body language screaming a confidence that was utterly alien to the boy Bakugo had known his whole life. "He is surprised," the symbiote purred, a dark satisfaction blooming in their shared consciousness. "His worldview is crumbling. Good. Let us shatter it completely." Bakugo growled and launched another attack, a series of smaller, faster explosions designed to overwhelm. Izuku didn't try to block this time. He moved. With a burst of speed that seemed to defy physics, he dodged to the side, the explosion scorching the wall where he had been a split second before. The symbiote wasn't just enhancing his strength, it was streamlining his entire nervous system, cutting his reaction time to a fraction of a human's. He moved with the inhuman grace of a panther, his feet barely touching the ground. "Stand still and fight me, you damn coward!" Bakugo roared, frustration creeping into his voice. "We are fighting, Kaken," Izuku replied, his voice calm and even. "You just can't keep up." The taunt, so uncharacteristic of the old Deku, hit Bakugo like a physical blow. With a scream of pure fury, he unleashed his trump card. He raised his gauntlet, the one shaped like a massive grenade, and aimed it at Izuku. "He's going to do it," Izuku realized with a jolt of alarm. From the observation room, All Might's voice crackled over the comms in Izuku's ear. "Young Bakugo, stop! Are you trying to kill him? He won't die if he dodges!" Bakugo screamed back, his thumb hovering over the trigger. He was blinded by rage, consumed by the need to prove that Deku's newfound power was nothing compared to his. He pulled the pin. A colossal, building-shaking explosion erupted from the gauntlet. It wasn't a targeted blast. It was a tidal wave of destructive force that tore through the hallway, ripping chunks of concrete from the walls and ceiling. Izuku had nowhere to dodge. The hallway was too narrow. "Armor!" the symbiote roared in his mind. In the split second before the inferno consumed him, the black biomass exploded from Izuku's body. It wasn't just a shield this time. It enveloped him completely, forming a thick, layered cocoon of hardened, organic matter. He felt the concussive force, a deep, bone-jarring impact, and an intense, searing heat that made the symbiote shriek with pain and fury in his mind. Fire was one of its weaknesses, a primal fear hardwired into its alien DNA. When the smoke cleared, Bakugo was panting, his gauntlets smoking. The hallway was a ruin, and standing in the middle of the devastation was a figure that was no longer entirely human. The cocoon had peeled back, but parts of it still clung to Izuku. Black, armored plates covered his chest and arms, and his mask had been torn away, replaced by the symbiote itself. The lower half of his face was a shifting mass of black goo, which peeled back to reveal his gritted teeth, but the grin it formed was too wide, too predatory, and his eyes, his gentle green eyes, were now surrounded by jagged white patches, giving them a monstrous, inhuman appearance. "That was a bad idea, Kaken," Izuku's voice echoed, now a layered chorus of his own and a deeper, guttural snarl. The pain from the fire had enraged the symbiote. Its predatory instincts, which Izuku had been struggling to keep in check, were now boiling just beneath the surface. He could feel its cold, murderous fury bleeding into his own, a tempting whisper that promised retribution. Control. Izuku reminded himself, his own will a dam against the symbiote's rage. Stick to the plan. Bakugo was momentarily stunned by the monstrous visage before him. This wasn't Deku. This was something else. Something terrifying. But his shock was quickly replaced by a fresh wave of anger. "So you finally show your true colors, you monster!" He blasted forward again. But this time, Izuku was ready. A black tendril, fast as a striking snake, shot from his back. It didn't aim for Bakugo's body. It aimed for his leg, wrapping around his ankle and yanking. Bakugo's propulsion became his undoing. He was thrown off balance, his trajectory sending him careening into a wall. Before he could recover, Izuku was on him. He moved with a speed that was utterly disorienting, appearing before Bakugo in a blur. This was the part of the plan Izuku had borrowed from his hero analysis notebooks. Specifically, his notes on Eraserhead. He knew he couldn't beat Bakugo in a long-range firefight. He had to get in close and neutralize his weapon. Bakugo swung wildly, but his movements were clumsy, predictable. Izuku ducked under a right hook, his own hand shooting out. A thin, black webbing shot from his wrist, plastering Bakugo's right hand, his main exploding hand, to the wall behind him. "What is this stuff?" Bakugo roared, struggling against the incredibly strong, elastic material. Another shot of webbing pinned his other hand. He was trapped, spread-eagled against the wall. He could still trigger explosions, but with his hands immobilized, he couldn't aim them effectively. The fight was over. Izuku had won. But the symbiote was not satisfied. Not enough. It snarled in his mind, its fury at being burned still raging. "He is helpless. His throat is exposed. Let us finish this. Let us show him what a real monster is." Izuku felt his own body begin to move, his hand raising, the fingers elongating into sharp, black talons. The monstrous grin on his face widened, a long, reptilian tongue flicking out to taste the air. He was losing control. The pain and the adrenaline had weakened his resolve, and the predator was taking over. He saw the look in Bakugo's eyes. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo looked genuinely terrified. He wasn't looking at Deku, his childhood punching bag. He was looking at a monster that was about to kill him. That look, that pure, undiluted fear, was the slap in the face Izuku needed. This wasn't him. This wasn't what a hero did. "No!" He screamed the word in his own mind with every ounce of his will. "I am in control. We follow MY rules. We are a hero." He felt the symbiote recoil, snarling and spitting in his head like a caged animal, but it obeyed. The talons retracted. The monstrous face melted away, leaving Izuku's own sweat-streaked, determined face. He was panting, his body trembling from the strain of wrestling his own power into submission. He looked Bakugo in the eye. "It's over, Kaken." Meanwhile, several floors above, Uraraka had found the bomb room. Ida, taking his role as a villain with theatrical seriousness, had cleared the room of all furniture and obstacles, making a stealthy approach nearly impossible. "Aha, hero! You have found my lair!" Ida announced, striking a dramatic pose. "But you shall not get past me, for I am extremely evil." Uraraka knew she couldn't beat the speedy Ida in a direct confrontation. So she relied on the plan. She pressed the comm in her ear. "Deku, are you there? How's it going?" Downstairs, Izuku tapped his own earpiece. "He's contained. I'm on my way. Be ready." He left Bakugo webbed to the wall, still struggling and cursing. He shot a tendril to the ceiling and propelled himself upwards, crashing through the floor into the level above, then again, and again, using his raw power to ascend through the building in a direct, destructive path. He burst through the floor of the bomb room, landing in a crouch behind Ida. The villainous actor spun around, shocked. Midoriya? How did you get past Bakugo? Now Uraraka! Izuku yelled. It was the perfect distraction. As Ida's attention was fixed on Izuku, Uraraka made her move. She tapped a large piece of the debris Izuku had created, making it float with her quirk. Then, using it as a shield and a distraction, she leaped over Ida's head, her fingers outstretched. Improvised special move! She cried out. Comet home run! She swung the floating pillar like a baseball bat, sending a shower of smaller debris raining down on Ida. While he was distracted, she landed and slapped her hands on the surface of the papier-mâché bomb. I've touched the weapon! She declared. A loud buzzer echoed through the building. Hira team! Why yins? All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. In the observation room, the students of Class 1A were silent. They had just witnessed something incredible. They had seen Bakugo's overwhelming power, but they had also seen Midoriya's terrifying and strategic response. They had seen him block a massive explosion, move with inhuman speed, and end the fight not with a brawl, but with a clever, non-lethal capture. But they had also seen that face. That monstrous, fanged grin. That flash of pure, terrifying predator. Kirishima, the red-headed boy with a hardening quirk, broke the silence. Whoa! Bakugo is super strong, but Midoriya's quirk is kinda manly and terrifying at the same time. He was able to completely neutralize Bakugo without seriously injuring him. Yayarosa murmured, her hand on her chin. His tactical assessment was flawless. But the nature of his quirk, it's unsettling. Todoroki, who had watched the entire fight with a cold, analytical gaze, said nothing. But he had noted the way Midoriya's power had reacted to the explosion, the momentary shriek of pain he thought he'd heard. A weakness to fire and heat, perhaps? It was data to be stored away for later. Back in the ruined hallway, Izuku approached the still-webbed Bakugo. He reached out and, with a touch, caused the webbing to dissolve, freeing him. Bakugo slid down the wall, his body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and humiliation. He didn't look at Izuku. He just stared at the floor, his fists clenched. Why? Bakugo's voice was a low, broken whisper. All this time, you had this power. And you never told me. You let me think you were just some useless pebble. You were looking down on me, weren't you? Izuku's heart ached. He saw past the anger, past the pride, and saw the deep-seated insecurity that had always driven Kaken. The fear of not being the best. No, Kaken. Never, Izuku said, his voice earnest. This power, it's new. And it's complicated. I wasn't lying to you. Not about that. He offered a hand to help Bakugo up. Bakugo slapped it away, forcing himself to his feet. He finally looked at Izuku, and for the first time, Izuku didn't see a bully or a rival. He just saw a lost and confused kid. This doesn't change anything, Bakugo muttered, before turning and stalking away. This was just one win. I'm still going to be the #1 hero. You hear me, Deku? The words were the same, but the fire behind them was different. It was no longer aimed at a worthless obstacle. It was aimed at a true rival. As Izuku left the building, he was met by All Might. The #1 hero had a strange, conflicted expression on his face. Young Midoriya, he said, his voice unusually subdued. That was a masterful performance. Your strategy, your restraint, you acted like a true hero today. Thank you, All Might! Izuku beamed, his fanboy nature resurfacing. However, All Might continued, his smile fading. The nature of your quirk. I saw it on the monitors. It seemed to react to you. To your emotions. That rage, it was palpable, even through the screen. A quirk like that can be a dangerous thing, my boy. The seed of suspicion, planted during the beach cleanup, was beginning to sprout. All Might had seen countless quirks in his career. But this one felt different. It felt alive. It felt hungry. I'm working on controlling it, sir, Izuku said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He suspects, the symbiote whispered, its earlier rage now replaced by a cold, calculating caution. This one, the symbol of peace. He is powerful. More powerful than he appears. We must be careful around him. Izuku nodded, both to All Might and to the voice in his head. The battle trial was over. He had won the exercise, but he had also revealed a glimpse of the monster he was trying to control. He had proven he could be a hero, but he had also shown the world, and himself, the terrifying predator that lurked just beneath his skin. The fight against villains was just beginning, but the fight for his own soul was going to be a battle for a lifetime. The air on the bus to the unforeseen simulation joint was thick with the excited, nervous energy of 20 teenagers on the verge of their first real off-campus training exercise. The chatter was a lively symphony of boasts, questions, and friendly jabs. Izuku sat between Ida and Uraraka, trying to keep a low profile, but the aftermath of the battle trial had made him an unwilling subject of fascination. "I gotta say, Midoriya," Eijiro Kirishima called out from the seat across the aisle, his sharp-toothed grin wide and friendly. "Your quirk was so manly. The way you just blocked Bakugo's explosion and then wrapped him up without even breaking a sweat. But man, when you got that look on your face, kinda terrifying too," several other students murmured in agreement. Izuku felt a hot flush creep up his neck. "They fear us." The symbiote's voice purred in his mind, a low thrum of satisfaction. "Fear is a form of respect." "It is good, that's not the kind of respect I want." Izuku thought back, his fingers tracing anxious patterns on his knees. "I want them to trust me." Tsuyu Azuri, seated next to Kirishima, tilted her head, a single, long finger pressed to her chin in a thoughtful gesture. "Midoriya-chan," she said, her voice a characteristically blunt croak. "Your quirk reminds me of All Might's in terms of power, but it's so different in application. It seems like it's alive." Kero, the directness of the question sent a jolt of panic through Izuku. He could feel the symbiote's amusement, its metaphorical eyebrow raised at the frog girl's perception. "The amphibian is observant," it noted. "Perhaps too observant. We should warn her against such probing questions. A quick, non-lethal squeeze of the throat should suffice. We are absolutely not threatening our classmates for being smart," Izuku mentally hissed, forcing a nervous laugh. "Oh! Well, it's not really alive. It's just very versatile." "Yeah, versatile. I'm still figuring out all the things it can do." It was a flimsy lie, and he knew it. Bakugo, who was sitting several rows ahead and pointedly ignoring everyone, let out a disgusted "TCH." He knew better than anyone that what he had faced in that hallway was more than just a versatile quirk. The rest of the bus ride passed in a blur of similar, carefully navigated conversations. Izuku felt like he was walking a tightrope over a canyon. He had to project an image of a normal, powerful student, all while wrestling with the alien predator in his mind that viewed his new friends as a collection of potential threats, meals, and curiosities. Their arrival at the USJ momentarily silenced all internal and external conversations. The sheer scale of the facility was breathtaking. A massive dome housed a stunning variety of simulated disaster zones: a shipwreck, a landslide, a conflagration, a downpour, a mountain range. It was a hero's playground, a place to learn and grow. Standing at the entrance to greet them was the Space Hero, 13. The pro-hero's puffy, spacesuit-like costume was iconic, and their speech about the dual nature of quirks, their potential to both save and to kill, was inspiring and sobering. Izuku listened intently, the words resonating deeply with his own secret struggle. But as 13 finished their speech, a sudden, chilling event cut through the professional atmosphere. The lights in the dome flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered and ceased its flow, and in the center of the plaza below them, the air began to shimmer and warp, like heat haze on a summer road. The shimmer twisted into a swirling vortex of purple and black mist. "Stay together and don't move!" Aizawa's voice was sharp, cutting through the students' confusion. 13, protect the students! Aizawa pulled his yellow goggles over his eyes. He wasn't looking at a technological malfunction. He was looking at an attack. From the center of the dark portal, a man emerged. His body was obscured by pale, disembodied hands that seemed to be gripping his arms, his neck, his face. His visible eye was wild, his movements twitchy and unnerving. He was followed by dozens, then scores, of other figures, a motley, wretched-looking army of thugs and villains, pouring out of the portal like termites from a rotted log, but the most terrifying figure emerged last. A hulking, monstrous beast, its skin a dark, scarred purple, its muscles bulging to an impossible degree. Its head was bird-like, with a sharp beak, but its eyes were vacant and dead. Its brain was exposed, a grotesque pink mass visible through the top of its skull. The schedule said All Might was supposed to be here. The hand-covered man, Tamura Shigaraki, said, his voice a dry, scratching rasp. He began to scratch furiously at his neck. I wonder if he'll show up if we kill a few kids. This was real. This wasn't a drill. 13, get them out of here. Try to get a signal. Aizawa commanded, his signature scarf-like capture weapon already unfurling around his neck. Kaminari, try using your quirk to contact the school. Aizawa didn't wait for a response. He launched himself down the massive staircase, a lone, dark figure hurtling towards an army. He was a master of his craft, an erasure hero perfectly suited to fighting a crowd of villains who relied on their quirks. He moved like a phantom, erasing powers, binding villains with his scarf, and taking them down with brutal, efficient martial arts. But as the students turned to flee, the purple mist appeared before them, coalescing into a more solid, well-dressed form with glowing yellow eyes. Greetings, said the entity known as Kurojiri, his voice a polite, terrifying baritone. We are the League of Villains. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Our apologies, but your little field trip ends here. My role is to scatter you, and to torture you to death. Before anyone could react, the black fog exploded outwards, engulfing them. Izuku felt a sickening, weightless sensation, a disorienting lurch as the world dissolved around him. He was falling, tumbling through a cold, dark void. Then, with a splash that stole his breath, he was plunged into icy water. He surfaced, gasping, in the middle of the shipwreck zone. The water was choppy, and a large, metal boat floated nearby. He wasn't alone. A few meters away, Tsuyu's head bobbed above the water, her frog-like quirk making her perfectly at home. A little further, Mineta was screaming in terror, his purple, ball-like hair keeping him afloat. The water around them began to churn. Villainous faces, some with aquatic mutations, broke the surface, their expressions a mix of cruel glee and predatory hunger. Looks like we hit the jackpot. One villain with shark-like features sneered. A couple of kids fresh for the picking, Mineta shrieked, tears and snot streaming down his face. We're gonna die. We're gonna be fish food, pathetic. The symbiote hissed in Izuku's mind. His fear is irritating. And these hunters? They are about to become the prey. Izuku felt a cold calm settle over him. The fear was still there, a knot in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by the symbiote's icy, predatory focus. He was in his element. Their element. As the shark villain lunged, its jaws wide, Izuku's body reacted with blinding speed. He didn't even need a conscious command. A black, whip-like tendril shot out from his back, slicing through the water with impossible velocity. It wrapped around the villain's neck, the grip so sudden and so tight that the villain's eyes bulged, a choked gurgle escaping his throat. Izuku's head rose higher from the water, his eyes glowing with a faint, dangerous light. His voice, when it came, was a distorted, layered duet. Get out of the water. The sheer, cold menace in his voice was more terrifying than any threat. He flicked his tendril, and the shark villain was launched through the air, skipping across the water like a stone before crashing into the hull of the ship with a sickening thud. He was out cold. The other villains froze, their confident sneers melting into uncertainty and fear. No! The symbiote urged, its bloodlust stirring. Izuku took a deep breath and dived beneath the surface. A thin, shimmering layer of the symbiote coated his face, acting as a rebreather, filtering oxygen directly from the water. He was a torpedo of black muscle, more at home in the dark water than any of the villains. He moved among them like a nightmare. A villain with a quirk that let him shoot pressurized water jets found his arms suddenly bound to his torso by thick, black webbing. Another, who tried to grapple Izuku, found himself clutching a fist that had morphed into a solid, anvil-like hammer, the resulting underwater impact knocking him unconscious. He moved with a brutal, non-lethal efficiency, a whirlwind of tendrils, hardened fists, and suffocating webs. Within 30 seconds the water was clear of conscious threats, the villains either knocked out and floating, or desperately swimming for the edge of the zone. He propelled himself onto the deck of the ship, landing silently. The symbiote receded, leaving him dripping and panting. Mineta was still blubbering, but Tsuyu was staring at him, her large, dark eyes wide with a mixture of awe and profound unease. "Midoriya-chan," she said, her voice steady despite the situation. "That was incredible. But also really scary. Kero, we have to figure out a plan." Izuku deflected, his mind already racing, analyzing their situation. He was in control. He had managed the threat, protected his classmates, and kept the predator on its leash. He just had to keep it that way. They formulated a plan, wait for an opportunity, then create a massive whirlpool to pull the remaining villains in while they made a break for the shore. They needed to get back to the entrance, to help the others. They peered over the edge of the boat, their eyes fixed on the central plaza where their teacher was still fighting. And that's when they saw it. Aizawa was a hero. A damn good one. He had taken down dozens of the Lotor villains, a single, competent warrior against the tide of mediocrity. But he was tiring. And he had just made a fatal error. After dispatching a group, he blinked, his eyes dry from overuse of his quirk. In that split second, the bird-beaked monster, the Nomu, moved. It was faster than anything Izuku had ever seen. One moment it was standing by Shigaraki's side, the next, it was upon Aizawa, its massive, five-fingered hand gripping his arm. There was a sickening snap that echoed across the plaza, the sound of bone giving way. Aizawa cried out, a raw, guttural sound of agony. The Nomu wasn't done. It slammed him into the ground, the impact creating a spiderweb of cracks in the concrete. Then it grabbed his other arm, twisting it behind his back at an impossible angle. Another sharp crack. From the deck of the ship, Izuku could only watch in frozen, abject horror. "Sensei!" he whispered, his voice trembling. He saw Shigaraki stroll casually over to the downed, broken form of his teacher. "You're so cool, Eraserhead!" Shigaraki rasped, a childish glee in his voice. He reached out and placed a hand on Aizawa's elbow. The fabric of his costume began to decay, crumbling into dust, and the skin beneath began to crack and flake away. Aizawa screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. Something inside Izuku Midoriya broke. It wasn't a rational thought. It was a fault line running through the core of his being that suddenly gave way. He had spent his entire life worshipping heroes. They were symbols of hope, of strength, of unbreakable will. To see one of them, his teacher, a man who had put his life on the line for his students, being so casually, so cruelly dismantled, it was a fundamental violation of his universe. It was blasphemy. His own desperate, righteous fury surged, a white-hot geyser of emotion. He wanted to save him. He wanted to punish them. He wanted to tear the man with the hands limb from limb. And the symbiote, sensing this cataclysmic emotional shift, responded in kind. It too felt the rage. The host was in distress. A protector of the host, a member of their new, strange class pack, was being destroyed. This was an unacceptable threat. Its own ancient, predatory instincts, which had been simmering under a lid of forced restraint, now boiled over. It didn't want to just subdue the threat. It wanted to eradicate it. It wanted to feast on its bones. Izuku's heroic rage and the symbiote's protective fury merged. The internal dialogue, the constant negotiation and bickering, ceased. The dam of Izuku's will, which had been holding back the monster, shattered into a million pieces. There was no more Izuku and symbiote. There was no more we. There was only a single, unified, and utterly incandescent consciousness with one, all-consuming purpose: destroy. "Midoriya-chan?" Tsuyu's voice was filled with alarm. "What's wrong?" "Your skin." Izuku wasn't listening. A low growl was building in his chest, a sound that was not human. Black veins began to snake across his skin, visible even through his drenched costume. The suit began to ripple, not with water, but with the living biomass underneath. "We have to save him," he grunted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a guttural snarl. He took a step towards the edge of the ship, and his body began to contort. The change was not clean or heroic. It was a grotesque, horrifying metamorphosis. His muscles swelled and bunched, tearing through the green fabric of his hero costume. His bones audibly popped and elongated, his stature growing by a foot, then two. His spine arched, and the respirator that formed his hero's smile was torn apart as his jaw unhinged, stretching far beyond human limits. Black, glistening biomass erupted from every pore, consuming him, reshaping him. His gentle, freckled face vanished, replaced by a monstrous, inhuman visage. A gaping maw filled with rows of long, needle-sharp fangs split his new face, a long, purple, serpentine tongue lolling out, dripping with a viscous fluid. His eyes were gone, replaced by two massive, jagged white patches that resembled the eyes of a demonic spider. A matching white symbol spread across his chest and back. Mineta, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally found his voice and let out a piercing, terrified shriek. Tsuyu could only stare, her mind unable to process the transformation of her kind, nervous classmate into a 9-foot-tall monster of rippling black muscle and razor-sharp teeth. The thing that was no longer Zukamidoriya threw its head back and let out a roar. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the shriek of a dying star and the growl of a predator at the dawn of time. It blasted across the USJ, a concussive wave of sound that shook the very dome. It was a sound that promised death and desolation. Every head in the facility snapped towards the source. The scattered students, the villains, Kurojiiri, Shigaraki, even the vacant-eyed Nomu, all froze, stunned into silence by the sheer, primal fury of that sound. Down in the plaza, Shigaraki paused his torture of Aizawa, his head tilting. What was that? Another new player? Is this part of the game? Before he could get an answer, the monster on the ship launched itself into the air. It didn't jump. It was propelled by a dozen thick tendrils that blasted from its back, turning its leap into a meteoric launch. It cleared the 100-meter distance from the ship to the central plaza in a single, terrifying arc, landing with a ground-shaking boom that cracked the concrete, positioning itself between the Nomu and Aizawa's broken form. It rose to its full, horrifying height, a bulwark of living darkness. It surveyed the scene, the broken teacher on the ground, the hand-covered villain, and the hulking, bioengineered creature. Its new senses were an explosion of information. It could smell Shigaraki's dry, flaky skin. It could hear the frantic, terrified heartbeats of its classmates across the dome. And the Nomu was an abomination. A hollow shell. A puppet of flesh that radiated a profound wrongness. Shigaraki took an involuntary step back, his visible eye wide. Whoa! What the hell is that thing? Is it one of the students? No way. It must be a secret pro-hero. The monster, this Venom, ignored him. Its attention was solely on the Nomu. It let out another low, guttural snarl, a promise of violence. The Nomu, acting on its simple instructions to eliminate any threat, charged. It was a clash of titans. The unstoppable force met the embodiment of savage fury. Venom met the Nomu's charge head-on, its massive, clawed hands grappling with the creature's own. They were locked in a stalemate of brute strength, the ground cracking under their feet. The Nomu was stronger, its bioengineered muscles superior, and it began to push Venom back. But Venom was not just a brawler. It was a shapeshifter. Its arms rippled and morphed, elongating into two massive, jagged, obsidian-black blades. With a guttural roar, it drove the blades forward. They pierced the Nomu's thick, purple hide, sinking deep into its torso. It was the first real damage the creature had sustained. The Nomu didn't even seem to register the pain. It simply relied on its shock absorption quirk. The wounds began to bubble and close, pushing the blades out. It swung a massive fist, catching Venom in the side and sending it flying. The monster crashed into the side of the central fountain, shattering the stone structure. Shigaraki cackled, scratching his neck with glee. It's strong, but it's no match for my Nomu. Nomu was designed to kill All Might himself, but Venom was already getting up. The crater in its side was already healing, black biomass knitting the wound closed. It shook its head, letting out an irritated snort. Pain was just information. It charged again, but this time it was smarter. It was faster, more fluid. It ducked under the Noma's clumsy swings, its form shifting and contorting. Tendrils lashed out like whips, striking the Noma's joints. It leaped onto the creature's back, its massive jaws snapping, tearing away a chunk of flesh from the Noma's shoulder, which began to regenerate almost instantly. The students watched from their various zones, paralyzed with a mixture of terror and awe. They didn't know who this black monster was, but it was fighting the villain's monster. It was, in its own horrifying way, protecting them. Venom realized brute force wasn't enough. It needed to be smarter. As the Noma tried to grab it, Venom's body seemed to melt. It flowed up the Noma's arms and torso, its mass engulfing the creature's head and upper body, trying to suffocate it, to crush it from all sides with constricting pressure. The Noma thrashed, its raw strength immense. It tore at the symbiotic mass, but it was like trying to punch tar. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The Noma's struggles weakened, but then, with a final, desperate surge of power, it ripped the symbiote off, throwing the mass of black goo to the ground, where it instantly reformed into its monstrous shape. The two monsters stood panting, facing each other across the ruined plaza. Venom was a whirlwind of savage, unrelenting fury, but the Noma was a wall of infinite regeneration and shock absorption. A stalemate. Venom let out another frustrated roar. It was about to charge again, to give every last ounce of its strength, to tear itself apart if it meant destroying this thing, when a new sound cut through the chaos. Boom! The main doors to the USJ were blown inward, ripped from their very hinges. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright sunlight, was a familiar, colossal figure. His smile was not present. His face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. "Have no fear!" All Might's voice boomed, devoid of its usual cheer, resonating with a terrifying, quiet rage. "Because I am here." His eyes scanned the scene of devastation, taking in the scattered villains, the broken form of Shota Aizawa, his terrified students, and the two monsters locked in a death struggle in the center of it all. He saw the purple, bird-like behemoth, and then he saw the 9-foot-tall creature of living darkness, its fanged maw dripping, its body a nightmare of black muscle. And for a split second, in the center of that monster's chest, he saw the tattered, unmistakable remnants of a green UA hero costume. All Might's blood ran cold. The situation was far worse than he could have ever imagined.